welcome to Math for All, where we try to make math creative, curious, and inclusive. I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Subnani. Thank you for joining us on season 5 of Math for All. We're really excited. We're going to be speaking with our friend Dr. Pam Seda today. And you may notice something this season. We've always made the point of trying to really highlight women in math education or education in general. But this season, we are taking that to the next level. So this season, all of our guests are either women doing work in the field or non-binary people. And so we are really excited and hope that you will join us for this whole experience this season. You can always catch up on YouTube if you would like. And we're really happy to talk with some of our favorite guests and some new guests. So you can follow us along in any of these spaces to find out who's coming up next and more about our amazing guests.
Yes, and you can also find us at mathforall.us. And oh my gosh, first show of the season, where's our book? Here it is. Don't worry, I have it. If you're interested in our book, please go to Didex. And I'm excited about this conversation, right? Because it's still September and leaders are trying to get their buildings in order. So let's talk to Dr. Seda about what shifts must school leaders and teachers make to create equitable and engaging math experiences for all students. So great way to get the year started. So I am going to introduce Dr. Seda. Dr. Pamela Seda, CEO of Seda Educational Consulting, with 30 plus years in education, helps leaders support teachers in meeting the needs of their marginalized math learners so students are empowered to do the hard work of learning. As a former math teacher, instructional coach, college instructor, and district math supervisor, she's the creator of the Vang Math card game and co-author of Choosing to See, a framework for equity in the math. Oh, I was looking for my book. Do you think in that mess over there I could find it? So glad that you did. A framework for equity in the math classroom. Dr. Seda, a board member of NCSM Leadership in Mathematics Education and president of the Benjamin Banneker Association, frequently speaks about math equity and advocates for mathematics instruction that develops all students as thinkers and problem solvers. So let's bring her in. Hello. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. So glad to be here.
Same.
We are very excited about it as well. You've always been one of our favorite guests, and so we really wanted to have you back on this year to celebrate all of the work that you've been doing and continue to do. So we're really, really excited about that. And in case someone didn't catch you in one of our previous episodes, we love to start with, what's your math story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the pleasure of being a military brat. My dad was in the Air Force, and I grew up overseas. Actually, I was born in Germany, went to Louisiana for a while, and then went back to Germany. And so I spent all of my elementary school years in Germany on a military base. And math was my favorite subject. And my teacher affirmed that, like they affirmed my math smartness, my classmates did, and it never seemed like it was a weird thing. I had the benefit of being able to make sense of math and enjoy math, and I can't explain to you when it became my favorite subject. It just was, as long as I can remember. And so I moved stateside in middle school. I moved to California first, and then I moved to South Carolina in 10th grade. And it didn't take me long to realize that most of my friends didn't have the same positive math experience that I had. But I would say there's this conversation that I remember very clearly that I think was the catalyst of my equity journey. So when I was in high school, I was in 11th grade, I was talking with my friends about the SAT, and she was like, well, you know, the SAT is racist. And I had heard people say that before. So I just asked her, why did she think it was racist? And she said, because they base it on white students, and we all know that they're smarter than us. And I was just taken aback. And I was sad. I didn't really kind of know quite how to respond. I said weakly something like, well, I think I'm just as smart as any white person. But in the back of my mind, I kept asking myself, well, what schooling experiences did she have that led her to that belief? Now, I did understand that I was now in school in the South, and I knew that there were oftentimes different expectations, even though my school was probably half and half, 50% Black, 50% white. I was in the honors classes, and I would maybe be 2 or 3 Black people in there. So my classes were disproportionately white compared to the makeup. So that was very obvious to me. And so I could say that was probably the beginning of what I would call my journey to try to figure out why. Why did some people doubt their own abilities in mathematics, especially people who look like me? So it wasn't surprising that I eventually became a math teacher because I tutored all of my friends in school, right? So I became a math teacher. And so my very first school that I taught at was similarly about 50% Black, 50% white, but there wasn't a single Black person in the calculus class, not one. And the remedial math classes, I remember I taught one remedial math class. There was one white kid in there and everybody else was Black. And so I'm seeing now as an adult, as a teacher, some of the very things that I saw in high school were being duplicated. This was in the early 90s. And so for me, I set this journey to figure out why. It wasn't enough for me for us to just document achievement gap. I wanted to find some solutions. We could say, okay, this is why there are gaps. But if we're not addressing them and if we're not creating solutions, then I felt like we weren't really doing much good. And so that is probably, what I continue to do now is find answers to that question. I started a PhD program in order to answer some of those questions, and the framework that came out of my doctoral work, I think is a major key to what I believe is solution, and that's what I wrote about in the book, Choosing to See.
Yes. This one. Go get it
Yes.
if you don't already have it.
Great book. It's a great book.
Thank you.
And I like, as a starting off point for that, there was a couple of things that, well, there's a lot of things that I have marked, but one of the things that I wanted to get at first was, can you talk about maybe a little bit like the title Choosing to See? Because I have a reaction about choosing and seeing. Like those things resonate in a different way, maybe for me than other people. But can you talk a little bit about why that choice as kind of the title for the work?
Yeah. So I think about the phrase, I think it was Maya Angelou who said, when you know better, you do better. But I think there are people, for a variety of reasons, sometimes self-preservation, choose not to see the inequities that are going on in our classroom. And I know at the time I actually started writing the book in 2020 at the time that Black Lives Matters was very popular. And so there seemed to be this reckoning that people were finally becoming aware that there were inequities. Equity was a popular topic. Now we know that was very short-lived, but what I recognize is that even when people were willing to talk about equity, we need to have equity. Very few people were willing to acknowledge the inequities that existed right in their schools. And so I recognize that it's a choice, right? It's a choice to see the inequities in front of us so that you can do something about it. But it's also a choice to see who our students are and not try to gloss over and see our students through what I call sometimes with very good intentions, a colorblind stance, where people say, well, I don't see color. And I believe that they say that with the best intentions of saying, well, I don't discriminate. Um, I'm not prejudiced against students because of their color or because of their ethnicity or things like that. But it's still an erasure, and it's still the idea that if I have to choose to acknowledge or pretend like a certain characteristic doesn't exist, then something must be wrong with it. And so that's why I think it's important that we choose to see our students in their full humanity, and we choose to see the inequities that are currently in our system that produce the results that we have now.
Yeah. I love that idea is okay, we're choosing to see or not see. Either way, we're making a choice, right? Either way, we're choosing something by not making a choice too. That's the opposite side of that as well. Is if we're not choosing to see who our students are, what our environment is, what our systemic
the structures
are, then that's also a choice. There's no opt out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, this sounds ridiculous in a way, but it's easier for teachers to not see, even though they're directly with students all day long, because they're not creating the structures in the school that I think are often humongous barriers to equity. And so leaders, I mean, this leads right into your question, right? Let's get to it, I guess. But I really think that leaders need to be even more cognizant of the idea that there are inequities in schools because the structures that built the school have created a lot of them. I mean, teachers can do some things in their classroom to create equity in their little unit there, but I do think that, well, anyways, let's talk about it. This is what we're here for. So what shifts must school leaders and teachers make to create equitable and engaging math experiences for all students?
Well, I think it's starting with 3 things that often sabotage our best efforts. I want to start off by talking about those. Because if we can identify those things that sabotage our best efforts and our attempts to try to create equitable, then the solutions will be more evident and clear. So I think the first thing that sabotages our efforts is the fact that we have 2 visions of what math success is operating in our schools, in our buildings. And we don't ever uncover that. We don't talk about it. They're just existing and they're competing. So what do I mean by that? So the first vision is what we have normalized, that math success is being able to reproduce procedures and get answers quickly and efficiently. And that's what math success is. And that means if that's what makes math success is, then my job as a teacher is to make the examples as clear as possible, give out step-by-step instructions, and to avoid confusion at all costs. And that's what I see my job is. And so then success is defined, right? How do I measure success? Is by test scores, like standardized tests. How many of my students can get a certain number of answers? And we sort. So we sort students based on, how many kids got the most answers right and who didn't get the most answers right. And the impact of that is those who get sorted at the bottom, especially those who carry the weight of stereotypes because of their identities, then start to think, well, if I'm not able to easily produce these right answers, then something must be wrong with me. Or they start to believe, well, these stereotypes about my identity must be true. So that's the impact on students for that first version.
Mhm.
And I think the vast majority of us, that was the schooling process. That was the world that we came through.
Mhm.
The second vision for success is that math is for to develop critical thinkers and problem solvers, right? And so if I believe that, then my goal as a teacher is to create learning experiences and create learning environments where students have the opportunity to engage and make sense of the mathematics in community, not as individuals, but as community. And in community, we think, we grapple, we reason, we use math problems to learn the mathematics, right? And then um, we can practice problems later. But the purpose of math task is to have kids make sense of the mathematics. So then when we're using that vision, our measure of success is, yes, answers are important and we are looking at right answers, but we're looking at the thinking and the reasoning that leads. So we recognize there's a trajectory. So that even if kids don't have certain prerequisite skills, we understand that they still can move along the trajectory of learning because our brains are capable of noticing patterns. All brains are capable of thinking and reasoning. All brains are capable of that. And so rather than allowing prerequisites to be a gatekeeper to prevent access to certain content, in the second vision, we understand that those prerequisite skills can be handled in context of community and that the teacher doesn't have to be the only one that provides that support. So the fact that both of these visions exist in a school, they're competing, is I think is the major barrier that whatever initiatives that we try to roll out and then we say we're going to do this, people interpret those initiatives through the lens. If I think vision one is what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm going to implement that initiative using vision one thinking. If I live in vision two, I'm going to initiate, and the problem is we often don't ever uncover those assumptions. We just assume that everybody thinks about math the same way that I do. So I think that is the major impediment.
I never really looked at it as having those two things existing. I mean, obviously, I feel like I'm saying something that's just so ridiculous, but I never really thought of them as like two competing things in a school that is creating the problem itself. Like, basically, I was thinking like, well, not everybody thinks the same thing, so it is a problem, but having that view of those two things being competing adds a different element to it. And I think people don't talk about their philosophy, and they're not required to talk about their philosophy beyond their resume or their letter of, their intro letter. When I recently worked in a school in New York, and it was just for one day. I met these teachers for the first time, and I've never been in a room where there was as much growth mindset as there was in this one room. And I won't say that everybody was with your, fully on with your second scenario of thought, but everyone was much, much closer to that in this room. And it was like, wow, how did you
How'd
do
that happen?
that? Right.
Right.
Like, I've never been in that. Well, I guess I wouldn't be hired too much, right? If they are already some forward thinking, but it was just, it felt different. The conversations were richer. Everybody was more willing to contribute to the conversation. There wasn't a real tension between what people were saying. It was interesting, but what you just said reminded me of that because there is a tension there.
And that leads to the second thing that sabotages, because we oftentimes don't understand those competing visions are happening, is professional learning. So we oftentimes implement professional learning with teachers, either using a vision one lens, we are telling teachers what to do, But what we forget is even those of us who are leaders who are wanting and firmly entrenched in Vision 2, oftentimes teachers who've come through, have totally lived in the Vision 1 world, have no idea what it looks like, sounds like, or feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to engage them in professional learning to where they get to engage in mathematics with Vision 2 instruction. Like we have to give them, we have to model, we have to create the spaces for them to experience Vision 2 instruction so that they'll even know how to engage in it. Because just telling teachers what they are supposed to do, giving them a pacing guide, giving them all the resources for them to read, it's not going to get it. So I think a lot of our professional learning is just misaligned, right? It doesn't align with people who say, yes, I want Vision 2 instruction, but their professional learning is still is based on Vision 1. So that misalignment happens in professional learning. The third place that misalignment happens is our metrics for measuring success. And we use multiple choice, selected response. We still use data that says, can a kid get the right answer? That's deeply rooted in Vision 1 instruction. And we have very few metrics that measure kids' thinking. And, like looking at student work or surveys that help us understand students' identity and how they feel, whether they have a sense of belonging in the math class. Like there are so many conditions that we know that have to exist in the classroom for Vision 2 instruction to be able to happen, because it is complex thinking and creating those community of learners, and kids will give up very quickly if those conditions aren't met. But we have no way we don't measure those. I'm not saying we have no way. There are ways. It's just the vast majority of our schooling practices and our metrics we use for success are measuring Vision 1 instruction. And so once again, it's competing. Our metrics are competing with what we say we value. So those are the three things that I think are really hindering our efforts. And so if we do the opposite, those are the solutions, right? It's like help create that shared vision of establish that shared vision of what effective or what math success is. But it has to be shared. It can't be just a leader coming in and saying, we're going to be Vision 2 school. Right?
That works every time.
Does it make sense to our teachers and our students? Right? So we have to engage them. We have to engage them in those experiences so that they know what it looks like, sounds like, and feels like. And then we have to, constantly bring everybody on board to make sure that they really understand, because it can't be shared without a shared understanding. They can't have a shared vision. So I think that's the first thing. And then we have to align our professional learning to that vision. And then we have to align our metrics to that vision. And so that's the work that I've been doing with schools. It's not easy work, but I think recognizing, those three challenges and then how to address them is the work.
Yeah. And I think it is hard. The hardest thing for me, I think, is the last one. How do we assess? And that's one thing that I've been playing around with a lot and thinking about and reading about and writing about and and it's, assessing what we value in the math classroom. And I feel like I can get teachers on board and in theory get to a certain level, and then societal things well, but what is that going to do to my GPA? Or how is that going to help my kid get into fill in the blank school? Or that is one that I struggle with so hard, because even if we build the system within the school that addresses that, we bump up into societal structures that how do we balance that? How have you worked towards that? Not that I'm, expecting your magic wand to pop out, but that is one of those things that, we often bump into the most. It's what do we do when they have to take MCAS at the end of it. What do we do? You know, like
Right.
those things I feel like I have an answer for, because that's a single day, one moment. You have control over how you assess the other 179 days of the year. Right.
Right.
But
So one
when
of the
we,
things,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, but when we get into like upper grades, like high school, etc.,
where grades are
push
so important.
is like the next thing, college, versus what they're doing and learning right then.
Well, I don't want to get sidetracked, but I will
Yeah.
say this. Colleges are understanding that they're not doing a very good job of teaching math as well. And so I'm doing a lot of work, especially with junior colleges, on doing the same work. So colleges are recognizing they haven't been successful and they wanted to be more successful too. So I work with a lot of junior colleges with this work. So that's another side. All right. So one of the things that I do when I'm communicating about the different competing visions is I'm careful to help people understand that vision 2 is not saying correct answers aren't important.
Right.
Right. I do not say you don't have to get correct answers. I say it's not the end. It's the thinking. So what I help communicate to people is that getting correct answers on a test, those are lagging indicators. And what we have to do is measure success along the way. Because if we don't celebrate and measure success on thinking and notice the kids thinking and improving and maturing along the way, they won't ever get to the right answers. And that's what Vision 1 does, because all it looks like is the final answer. And so there's no celebration of the thinking and how it's maturing over time. So students shut down.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you just quit. And so for those parents who say, "Oh, I got to get my kid into college," we agree that's the end goal, but your kids aren't going to get there if they quit before the finish line. And they're going to quit if we don't reward them and acknowledge this wonderful, brilliant thinking that's happening along the way to get to the right answer. And the other thing is, we still know that college is not the end. At some point in time, our goal is to prepare them to solve problems of life. And there is no answer key. And the questions constantly keep changing, so the answers will too. But what won't change is your students need to be able to understand a problem, to devise a plan, to carry out that plan, to go look back, problem solving. What won't change is their ability to make sense of a problem and persevering in solving them. What won't change is their need to be able to construct a viable argument and critique. Like those will never change no matter what math class, whether they're in school, whether they're not in school. And so the point is, I think it's very important that we do not sacrifice our students' futures for short-term increases on a single test on a single day.
Which is, I talk about this with teachers all the time. I'm like, when you are solving your real life problems, is there only one answer? And is only one answer correct? No, because you might choose one way of doing something and I might choose another way of doing something, and I'm perfectly happy with that way. I wouldn't do
our
your
answers
way.
depend on our values,
Right.
what we value. I remember just last week we were doing a problem where they were trying to notice patterns, and I had was using visual patterns of pennies and nickels, and I said, would you want stage 10 of pennies or would you want stage 10 of nickels? And the answers weren't that far off. They were only a few cents difference, but most of us would think, well, we want the one that has the most money, right? But then I remember one of my students said, well, I don't want all those pennies. Give me the nickels. I don't want to carry all those pennies.
My purse is not that big.
So they introduced a condition that was very realistic based on what they valued. And then they valued the convenience of not walking around with a lot of change in their pocket,
Mhm.
which is the reality of solving problems. And our
Mhm.
values, what we find important, it
Mhm.
differs. And so it's gonna change what solution we select.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
And I rewarded, like I acknowledged. I didn't
Yeah.
say, you hit the, you picked the wrong one. I acknowledge that because that's the type of thinking that employers want.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the rationale, which I think is the other like important thing, right? When we ask kids to make a statement, but also like support it with the reason why or explain the why, when you value that, that child is then more willing to give you a reason that might not go with the flow later on because they've actually thought through and processed it because they understand that you really value their thinking and reasoning and the
Yes.
why behind
Yes.
it versus just the like this amount because it's 2 more cents than what the other might be or whatever the amount happens to be.
Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
also thinking about too, adjustment, a shift that I had to make with my students, help my students make, is they would say, well, I turned in my work. And in their mind, their work was what they wrote on a piece of paper. And I'm like, no, that's not your work. Your work is the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's your work. What you put on that piece of paper is just supposedly you making your thinking visible, is evidence of your work. But your work is the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to help
Wow.
them understand that you're going to work in this class and you're going to do the most of the work in this class because I need you to do most of the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I do most of the thinking before class. And I'm thinking about what task am I going to select and how I'm going to have you engage with the mathematics and how am I going to engage you with each other and what questions I'm going to ask. I do all of that thinking before class. But when I walk in that class, my work is done for the most part.
Yeah.
I may have to be that orchestra leader who's,
Yeah.
but
Conducting.
the orchestra's doing the work.
Yeah.
I'm just standing up there up the front
Keeping time.
doing this.
I actually really love that. Because what you want to see in a classroom is kids thinking and doing. And I mean, it's so boring when you don't. And then teachers are very surprised when they have that, I forget how you were referring to it, but that first version thinking. They're very surprised that their kids don't understand.
They
I
make
don't
us
know why they
crystal
don't understand
clear.
this, but you never actually told them they needed to understand it. They only needed to do it.
Right.
The message wasn't to understand it.
And the thing is, Vision 1 is not aligned with brain research. Vision 2, and it's the thinking and the make sense that creates those synapses in our brains. And then the continue going back and forth is what makes it stick.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing that I was thinking about earlier when you were talking is that, not everyone has, like Heidi was talking about, societal influences, and there's the expectation that you are going to hate math because most people hate math, and there's messages all around. I just saw a commercial the other day that was a brand new commercial, and it was basically a mom saying that she can't do math to the kid. And I'm like, we're still doing that? We're still
Most people
doing
love
that?
money. So how can that be?
Yeah.
People don't hate math. They hate feeling dumb and stupid.
Yeah. And
Because people love
there's a
money.
big
And you
expectation
love
for that.
money.
Yep.
You can't love money and not do math.
So true.
But
That should
school
be the
math is so
commercial. That should be the
disconnected.
commercial.
Yes.
Can you
I
create a
don't know of
commercial
anybody
that
who hates
says
money.
that?
People handle money all the time. People do math all the time.
Yeah.
We are mathematical beings, even more than we're literate. We come out the womb being able to notice quantity. Our brains are hardwired that way. We are mathematical beings. So the fact that we think we're not math people is a farce. It's just school math is so distant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not just the math itself. It's it's that part that I was talking about under Vision 1 instruction. If you can't produce the answers to the question quickly in a certain amount of time,
Mhm.
then the perception is you're dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And who wants to feel dumb?
No
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Nobody.
There's a lot of terrible messaging. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that teachers don't do that on purpose. It's often the only way that they know. And if the math for them is not the most comfortable, this is the way they have the most control.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because
Right. And
if
then
kids start thinking and you don't know what they're saying,
absolutely.
then you've lost control.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
This is where the choice comes. We all have a choice,
Right.
right? When that happens,
Yep.
we can choose to sit in the discomfort. And when we sit in the discomfort because we see our students and we see the impact on our students, then we choose to learn, right? We choose to grow, we choose to change and choose to do something better. But if we don't see our students who they really are, we choose not to see the inequity,
Mm-hmm.
we just kind of turn a blind eye and do what's comfortable for us. Because the kids, I mean, my kids complain because they were like high schoolers. But, the young kids, they don't complain because they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And the ones who do complain, we label as troublemakers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously. They're messing up our class.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like those things get internalized so young. It's not many years into school before kids get that message. And
Mm-hmm.
changing that later, is
It's harder.
it's
Yes.
harder. And I was speaking with some teachers today. I was just like, don't expect your middle schoolers to not push back on the fact that you're asking them to think.
Right.
Or your high schoolers.
Right.
Like, I have two at home. They're brilliant and lazy.
Hope they're not watching the show, Hyde.
No, right. But they're
But
so smart. They will.
It is really selective laziness, though. You do know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right? It's very selective.
Yep.
And whereas all human beings,
we're gonna.
I used to really look down on my students, was like, they all said they wanted A's, but they didn't want to do their work. And I'm like, what's wrong with y'all? But then I started thinking about, how many of us are all trying to lose weight, but don't want to eat less and don't want to go to the gym? How different am I? Not really.
Yeah. And
I will work all day on a math problem, but ask me to go work out at the gym, not so much.
Yeah. And it's like they will, like my own too, at home, like they'll work at the things that they value. So it's like, how do I make them see the value in it? Number one, how do I let them know that I'm for real? Like both at home, if I am asking them to go take care of whatever, go take care of what, but then I eventually go and do it for them. I've just let them know that they will wear me down.
Yeah.
I will do it for them. Right. And kids in the classroom do that same thing because they know we're not there. We obviously didn't get into education for the money. And so we're not there because we're like wanting to be mean and wanting to not help them. And so like teachers see it too as like, oh, they've asked for my help on something, so I'm going to show them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so it's coming from the perspective of often like, oh, well, that's part of my job is to help in this, versus to create the conditions where they can do the thinking, say they can think, show they can think by not immediately rescuing them.
Yeah.
Once something gets a little bit difficult. And like, what do you do in those moments where like, okay, you've come out of like struggle that's productive and into unproductive. So like, what do you do at that moment really can be the difference between how willing they are to take a risk next time on trying something difficult.
And that to me should be the work we should be doing. Like that's the work that we should be spending our time as teachers and professional learning communities figuring that out. That to me is worth the effort. But we spend all our time on Vision 1 stuff.
Yeah.
We spend all our time creating those data walls, creating color coding. We have all these students all like, and that's pulling time away from the work that we really should be doing. I remember having this conversation with a teacher the other day, and he was talking about how oftentimes he doesn't even make copies anymore because of all the drama. The toner's out, the thing's broken. It's just, and he was like, but it's fine. And I get it. Sometimes we just think little things like that we can't change, right? I said, but it's not fine. Let me tell you why it's not fine. It's not fine because the time that you're fighting with that copy machine is time you're not figuring out how to address students' misconceptions. Because we don't think of the time, teachers' time in terms of that. Right? It's not okay also because your stress level and your blood pressure just went up 10 points. And when you walk into that classroom, your students feel that. You might not ever say it. But happy teachers make happy students. It's just little things like that. Those are the kind of things that I recognize that the system and the environment that we place teachers in, we really do set them up to fail because we're not investing our time in the things that really matter most for students learning.
Yeah. 100% that.
It's such,
and I told them, I said, just by the way, in wealthier public schools, they have parents who do that kind of stuff. I'm just saying.
right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. It's, yeah.
Very much.
I feel like the problem is just so big. And most of it for me is like, well, the structure of the school is built upon basically grades.
Vision 1.
Right. Yeah. It's basically, but grades are the end all be all that go out to the public, that kids take home to their parents.
Well, we have to grade
schools are graded on those. And it's,
yes, I agree. And I know that as a high school teacher, I didn't have the option of not giving grades.
yeah.
I always gave my first day speech to my students. I said, I don't care about grades. I care about learning. I wish I didn't have to get grades. There's also bunch of research that says grade actually undermines learning. So that's why I wish I didn't have to give grades. But you care about grades and your parents care about grades. So I'm gonna make you a deal. If you give me what I want, I'll give you what I want. You give me learning, I'll give you the grades. So they understood this is what I value. But then I had to create some structures. I had to create my own structures
Yes.
to where that could be true. And so one of the things that I've done is thought about, why do we have these different levels of not proficient, like D's and F's? Like, why are we doing that? Because we're sorting. We got to sort kids. We got to figure out.
Yeah. We
who's
want to
at
know
the bottom.
if you only have a 10, like you're way worse than that person with the 59.
Exactly. So what I did was I created a rubric that would clearly identify what proficient was. And if it wasn't proficient, then I would give them feedback about what made it not proficient, and they would do it again. Like you keep working on it, just like in English. You got essays, right? You write a rough draft. I give you some feedback, you get it back, you keep revising it until, I don't know why we don't do that with math, but I started doing that with math basically.
Yep.
Right. And so then once it became proficient, my rubric also had ways of what I had another column called uniquely brilliant.
Love it.
So you could be uniquely brilliant and different ways of being uniquely brilliant. And so then I just gave 3 grades. Proficient was an 85. If you had exemplary reasoning, you had a 95. And then if you were just creative or something that you did it all, but in a way that was unique or, uniquely brilliant, then you got 100. So that was my way of being able to address the grading thing, 85, 95, 100. But you're not getting a grade till it's proficient, because why do I care about a grade? my goal is it has to be proficient. So we're going to work on proficiency first. Make sure that's very clear. Everybody understands what proficiency is. That's the goal, proficiency. And if you know you're proficient, you get an 85 and at a minimum. If you want to go beyond proficient, I've shown you a pathway.
Love it. I love
Those
that
are things I
because
worked on my own. I closed my door with my students and I figured it out.
Right.
And now I get to share those with the schools that I work with, right? They get to be the beneficiaries of my years of figuring it out. But that was because I made a choice, right? I had to make a choice first. I made a choice to see how our current grades were harming kids, and I made a choice to do it differently. I didn't know the answers, but I figured it out once I made the choice.
But also your expectations were being set for students with the way that you created that rubric. Nobody will fail. Everybody will be proficient in here, and maybe it's going to take you longer, but everyone in this class will be proficient.
Right. Absolutely. And that to me is how the difference, how I define equity. And I know in this day where equity is a banned word, I know that we've gotten here because people have chosen to misrepresent what that word means. So I always define it for people. So you can't misrepresent what I mean by equity, because I'm going to tell you straight up what I mean by equity. And, my definition is everyone gets what they need to be successful. Simple as that. Everyone needs to, but we have to define what success is, right? There has to be a minimum bar. That's what I do, proficiency. Which means if everybody gets what they need to be successful, I have to clearly define what that minimum bar is and get everybody over it. And that's an idea that I got from Ken Williams in his book, Ruthless Equity. He said, it doesn't mean you lower the bar for everybody, but there's this minimum bar that we've agreed upon that we're going to get everybody over. That's the floor. Can they go further? Yes. But we don't accept that some are going to be good and some are going to be bad, and that's just the way it is. No, we're going to figure it out, because guess what? As a parent, you don't get to decide that some of your kids are going to fail. Like, have you allowed any of your kids? No. It's like, we're going to figure it out.
Yeah. It's such big work, but that's like the important part of it, right? And you spent hours on your own time figuring that out. And if we can make our professional learnings opportunities where we do that work collaboratively, where we're thinking about, like, moving that to, okay, what are those non-negotiables for proficiency? What does that proficiency look like? How, like, and design from that bar. I feel like, that's the most, it's worthy time to be spent in our professional learning opportunities.
But also, like, imagine that imagine that conversation whole school, right? Because we're talking about mathematics right now, where there is huge inequities. I mean, I'm not saying they don't exist elsewhere, but if multi-disciplines are having this conversation, how rich that conversation would be, and showing, here's the point of view of this math teacher, and here's the point of view of this social studies teacher, and like, how can we get those people to be closer in their thinking of what success is in this school? Because it's not, I mean, I think math gets a bad rap, and I think that it would be great if the whole school was working on developing this philosophy on what does it mean to be successful in a classroom. Here's what it means in a math classroom. Here's what it means.
What does Vision 2 look like, right?
Yeah, what does Vision 2 look like across the board? Because we should all be striving for this, and then it's much easier for students to understand where the bar is, because they're going to be seeing.
I've seen a trend. Like, if you look at all the standards that have been changed, social studies has changed their standards, science has changed their standards. I think at the standards level, that shift has happened, right there. If you look at all of them, they have some version of process standards.
Yeah.
If you look at them.
Okay.
Right. But I think the challenge is, like I said, we don't have this conversation.
You're
We're
right.
not explicit as to what vision. Too many of us are still filtering. We'll look at those Vision 2 standards through our Vision 1 lens, and that's what we see. And we're not making those things explicit. And then the other thing is, in math, we have to talk about content, because the reality is most of us learned how to get answers and we never really understood we never had the conceptual understanding. I
Yeah.
almost
I went all through
I was
college with math and I still
like,
didn't
I
understand
went to
most
Georgia
of it.
Tech. I went to Georgia Tech. I majored in
Okay.
engineering, and I took through differential equations, right? I
Okay.
did not understand the concepts until I started teaching math. So even your most successful math students
100%.
don't really understand it, right? So how
Right.
can you expect teachers to teach it? Like, you can't. So that's another reason why I think if we're talking about proficiency and what does that look like, you can't divorce it from the content. Like, I work with teachers on a particular topic. We engage in math. We do math tasks together. And once we've done that task, I said, okay, is this work proficient? Why or why not? I have them look at each other's work. So out of that comes the dialogue, and that's how we get clarity as to what proficient is, because we can't discuss what efficient is by just looking at some words on a piece of paper.
Yeah. I love that.
And that's the work that we do in PLCs.
Yeah. It's not like moving, if you're a leader of either a PLC, like, professional learning that we're doing, or like you're a coach in a classroom or you're a principal, and like, what are all the time suckers that you can let go of, right? Like, do we need to talk about like how we didn't want to walk on this side of the hall as we go in? Like, do we want to spend our time talking about that? Or do we
which
want
template we're going to use to turn in our lesson plan?
Yes, the way, like, whatever those things are, like,
where does the standard go? Like, where do we type all that into this template?
Right. Or do we want to like do the real work of creating that Vision 2 classroom, and we have to like build it in that way, like from the bottom up, top down, like they have to meet.
Yeah, we have to build it.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I don't by any means have all the answers. I'm not saying I have the answers. I am saying though that I've had the opportunity, after I felt like I was extremely blessed, after I got my doctoral degree, I had the opportunity to go back to the classroom, and not just for 1 or 2 years. I went back twice. I went while I was in the middle of my doctoral program. I went back to the classroom. And then after being a math supervisor and instructional coach, I went back to the classroom. And so with that knowledge, I still got to try some things with students for 4 more years, which is why I was then able to write the book, because I'm like, well, these are some things. But can you imagine how much more powerful it would have been if I had been able to do it in community with other teachers who were going in the same way?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I was by myself.
And I think a lot of teachers find themselves like that, right? I mean,
Right.
It's a shame, because there's a lot of energy that teachers can put forth into this. And if they're on an island by themselves and something doesn't work, then who do you talk to about it so that you can get over that hump? And I don't know, this whole the whole idea of the Vision 1 and Vision 2 just needs to be so explicit. And in my opinion, it should be something that people look for when they're hiring. What is your vision? Because here we believe this.
I do think there is more of a push. I do think more teachers, and especially more leaders, school principals, are squarely in Vision 2 camp. There's a lot more people in Vision 2 camp. It's just that they still do not recognize how much of what we do still lives in Vision 1, because we're not talking about it. It's like we say, oh yeah, I want to engage in collaborative. I want to see them engaging in questioning and talking and reasoning in the class. But when you look at your rubric that you're using for classroom observations, what are you dinging them for? Not having the standard written on the board, or the other stuff that has
Mhm.
nothing to do with what you just said is
Mhm.
Vision 2 instruction. Like you
Mhm.
hire these teachers, you ask them, and they come in with Vision 2, but then when you come in with that little checkboard, they're
Mhm.
getting dinged for stuff that's not has anything to do with Vision 2 instruction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So true.
Yikes. Well, there's so much work to do.
Yeah.
There is, but I think many hands make a heavy load light, which is why I'm so glad to come and talk on podcasts like this and get with
Yeah.
like-minded people. And the more that we talk about it, the more
Mhm.
we make it explicit, the more the brains that can come together to get
Mhm.
it done.
Yeah.
I just want leaders to know that you don't have to do this by yourself. I
Mhm.
want teachers to know you don't have to figure it out by yourself.
Mhm.
Right. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
You shouldn't. It should be a
Absolutely.
collaborative effort, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you might not know, it might that brain might not be, that Vision 2 collaborator might not be next door,
Mhm.
but they may be online. They
Yep.
may be
Yeah.
right. They may be in your PLC. They may be. I just love the fact that we can now use technology to help us find those people.
Mhm.
Yeah. Agreed.
No, it's a huge like game changer in that way, to have people that you have similar vision, similar you know, vision for what your classroom can be and what your school can be, and really have those collaborative moments to and like when things aren't going well, like you like this is what I want, but
Mm.
it's difficult, and so having a community that can help you with that is so important.
Well,
Yeah,
and
that's why I think
it's ongoing work too. I mean, this is not something you
absolutely.
sit down at the beginning of the year and you're like, okay, here's what we're
No,
doing.
no.
We're
Because as soon
on it.
as you
Let's
have an answer,
go.
the kids will change, right? As
Yeah.
soon
Right.
as you find something that works
Yes.
very
Yes.
well, they're going to change on you. It's not going to work anymore. So it is, you have
Hmm.
to constantly change. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also getting ready to say that's why our math organizations are still so very
Mhm.
important, right?
Yeah.
You can find those people. And I'm the president, as you mentioned, I'm the president of the Benjamin Banneker Association.
Mhm.
And so we're always looking for people who are like-minded, who can help us, solve the issue when it comes to Black students in mathematics. There's
Mhm.
TOTOS,
Mhm.
for the
Mhm.
multilingual learners. And then there's NCTM, which is our national organization. There's NCSM for our leaders. And so there are so many math education organizations that are there so that you can find those people to help
Mhm.
you solve the problems alongside. So you don't have to figure it out on your own.
Absolutely.
Great message. Great
Well, we
message.
could talk all night, but we
I
want to
know.
let people know where they can learn more about you, and we'll put those things up. So how can they find you?
So the first place is I am on Twitter and Instagram at pamseda.1. That is my handle on for both Twitter and Instagram. And you can come to my website, which you can get to there, pamseda.com, which will take you to my Seda Educational Consulting website. And you can subscribe to my newsletter when you go to that website. And I have a monthly blog and a weekly newsletter that's tied to that monthly blog. So you can always continually get new things, or we're talking about these issues.
Hmm. And
Excellent.
the book, go get
And the
it.
book,
It's
of
at your
Absolutely.
course.
library.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's where I talk about the ICU care
Yeah.
framework,
Yes.
which really is a kind of a how-to, a
Mhm.
lens for thinking about how do I live Vision 2.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. I love
And
it.
doable. So it's not like
Right.
not only like creating a vision for it, but also actionable steps that you can take to make that happen. So we're not just admiring the problem. It's like the
Exactly.
how to
Some
do
answers,
the
some
work.
things you
Yeah.
can try, things you can play,
Yeah.
a place to begin. I was purposeful in making sure that I gave enough examples so that anyone can find some place to start.
Hmm.
Excellent.
Which we love.
Thank you so much for giving us your time in a very, very busy month of the school year. We always love talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right. Well, gosh, again, we could just talk
Yeah.
all night about this topic. But but we're not going to. So our next show is on October 9th with Mona. And
until then,
go get our book. And until then,
we hope that you keep math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. Have a great night, everyone.
bye-bye.